Hello, Word Nerds. Happy Sunday and welcome to our live chat. This chat is the second part of a chat we did in like March or something. Yeah,
something like that.
Where we're talking about the realities of publishing. I'm not sure how much of that same stuff we're going to be covering today. We're going to try to dive into whole new territory and just talk about more that has to do with what it's like getting published, how you get there, and just what the publishing world is like. So to kick things off, we're going to talk a little bit about how each of us made the decision to go with the publishing route that we have decided to go with, if that makes any sense. So Erin, you are first.
Okay. Pretty much I've always known that I wanted my books on shelves. I am trying to do the hybrid thing, so a little bit of both, best of both worlds. But I've always known since I was young that I wanted to see my books on shelves, so that was the coolest thing, to be able to walk into a bookstore and do that. So, but I'm also a very impatient person, so I like to be able to have control over things to a certain point. So both of those things suited me. So I'm doing self-publishing and traditional publishing. So.
Emma?
Similar to Erin in that she, I want my books to be on shelves one day, which is why I really want to be traditionally published. And I also, and this is opposite of a lot of people who choose self-publishing, that I don't want to have to deal with like the cover and like finding an editor and all of that. Like I like that in traditional publishing, a lot of that is just taken care of for you by the publishing house. So it's another attractive thing for me.
Rachel?
I kind of like a bit of both things because I like to have control over my own projects. So in terms of choosing how my plot goes or cover designs or anything like that, I like the idea of self-publishing. But yeah, there is something about traditionally publishing that is, I guess, kind of like the old versus new media, that I'm not either opposed to either side. And I'm kind of also involved in the publishing industry on both sides. So I'm kind of like, whatever happens to give me the best deal or what I think would be best for my own book.
Yeah.
Megan?
That's one of the things that I love about publishing right now is that it doesn't have to be like all in one or the other. There used to be kind of like this, like, oh, well, if you're gonna self-publish, then you're never gonna traditionally publish. Which just isn't the case. Like Kira Cass's first book, she self-published, and then she wrote the Selection series, and it did very well, and she ended up traditionally publishing The Siren or whatever afterwards. So I think that's really cool. I am going the traditional route as of right now, and just like seeing my book on shelves is important to me. I like the payment system where like they invest money in you, and if someone's going to lose money, it's not going to be me. However, I'm like super open-minded about it. One of the things I love about my agent is that she also supports hybrid authors. So if I ever do want to go the hybrid route, that's an option.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, actually, I'll put in my agent is the same way. So she's very open about both, which was super important to me. So.
I am currently all in with self-publishing, and I don't see that changing in the foreseeable future. Getting on bookstore shelves has never been super important to me, although I'm not convinced. I don't know, the publishing industry is changing so quickly lately. I don't think there's any like, oh, you definitely can't do that doing any route. Although I think for me, not for me, but in general, I think the best option is if you do really well in self-publishing, you can get better deals from publishers. If you're looking at like The Martian started out as a self-published book and did phenomenally well. So I think that is intriguing to me, but for me, mostly I like the control. I like being able to do it on my own timeline. And I like the business side of things. It's fun for me. I like learning as I go and just kind of seeing where it takes me. So for now, I'm a big fan. So.
Yay!
Yay! So, realities of publishing. I'm trying to think. We covered a lot of the agent stuff last time.
Yeah, we do have a question a little bit in that regard from Shanice asking, when you want to be traditionally published, do you send it straight to publishing houses or do you submit to a literary agent?
Literary agent.
Agent first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are
You'll
some exceptions to this, but not with the
Mhm.
major, like the big 5 publishing houses.
Yeah.
And you'll have, I know one lady that I've come across on different forums and stuff that just swears up and down that you don't need an agent, you don't ever need an agent, you can send it to the big houses. And lots of the time, that's not true. You can't send it to the big houses. Some of the time there'll be particular instances like contests, or sometimes they'll tour, for example, will have like an open window, or maybe they used to, I don't know if they still do. But you still want an agent to negotiate for you, unless you know contract law very well, and in particular publishing contract law, because it's very particular. And I don't personally, so no thank you.
Yeah, it's important to know that like agents, not only do they know contract law, they know how to protect you in the publishing business, and they have contacts in the publishing business.
Mm-hmm.
They have contacts in the publishing business that you probably don't have. So
Yeah.
And they'll get you more money. That's always a good thing.
yeah.
That's why they're fighting for you, and to make sure, that you don't get, roped into something that is not a good contract. So.
Well, even from the self-publishing side, a lot of the successful self-publishers still have agents for dealing with things like foreign rights or movies or TV rights, should you be that lucky. So agents are always going to be a valuable asset on your side, which reminds me that I am actually a hybrid author. I always forget about it, but I have a Spanish translation that if I ever wanted to do something like that again, I'd love to get an agent to like negotiate all of that for me. I just took whatever deal. Sure, I have nothing to do with this. Great.
You can get what's called a literary lawyer if you absolutely need to. Like, say I went and I submitted a story in a contest or something, and some of the they're mid-sized pub like Entangled and Source Books, some of them will take unagented submissions. You don't necessarily want to turn down their contracts, so they're good publishers. So if you couldn't get a literary agent, you can get what's called a literary lawyer, and they specifically specialize in literary contracts and book contracts. So,
and something else you can do is if you have an editor at a publishing house who's interested in your work, it's okay to ask if you could like get a literary agent before you sign anything with them, and then you can query agents and say, hey, I'm sending you this project. It has interest from this editor at this imprint. Here's my query. Here's all the standard submission stuff. And that's actually like, if you have an editor interested, that's a nice way to get bumped up to the top of the slush pile.
Yeah, that happens a lot in contests like Pitch Madness and stuff, like the Twitter pitch contests. If like an editor favors it or favorites your tweet, and says send it to me, and then they end up offering you a contract, that's a great time to go query literary agents. Yeah. Like Megan said.
There's actually 2 guys who work at my local indie bookstore who have had that happen, where they got a publishing deal and then went and got agents. Yeah.
Are they YA or are they in another?
One's YA, one's middle grade.
Nice.
Yeah. It's the craziest story. Like, David Levithan just like came to the bookstore, and this never works for anyone, but this guy was like, hey, we write very similar things. You're an editor. You want to see my book? And he was like, yeah, you've done great at this event. You're awesome. You're fun. And they struck up a publisher.
Wow.
That's a cool story, but it's also a very specific story too, because he wasn't some rando stranger. He was a guy that helped David Leviathan out with his like book thing, right? Like,
they were working together.
Yeah, that's a very
just like approach him in a coffee shop or email him.
No, oh my God, please don't do that.
It's a very different thing. I'll never forget, like, I was laughing so hard because there's actual footage on YouTube of Stephen King answering questions during one of his like signing Q&As, and someone's like, can I give you my manuscript? And he starts trying to hand up his manuscript to Stephen King, and Stephen King's just like, no, next.
I feel cringy just listening to that story.
Oh,
secondhand embarrassment through the screen. So don't ever do anything like that. But yeah, that's different. That's a cool story. About the indie bookstore guy.
Yeah. we had a question from Charles asking, but don't you only get a small percentage of sales when you go traditional?
Yes.
Which is true.
Mm-hmm. It is also true. You have to think about the toss up between like the amount of work self-publishing is, and if you're a business savvy person, and how many books you're going to sell. A lot of self-published books only sell about 100. This is just, in general. And then you're going to have probably a marketing budget with traditional publishing. So you're probably going to sell quite a bit more than 100, hopefully. So it's a smaller piece of the pie for traditional publishing, but you might have a bigger pie, which is how I look at it. Because I am going to make, me personally, I know I'm going to make less money self-publishing because I'm not a business person. I'm like a writer first and foremost. If I was a business person, I would definitely go with self-publishing all the way, because you get that, you do get a bigger chunk of what you make. So.
And most of the self-publishing authors who are doing really well and making a lot of money are very prolific too.
Mm-hmm.
So constantly churning out books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can do it.
I can't do that.
Nope.
Yeah. Additionally, when you traditionally publish, they give you a check before, like when you sign the contract. They're like, we're going to give you this much money for the book, no matter what. Like if it sells however many copies it would need to earn out that amount of money, or if it doesn't, you get to keep that amount of money, which can a lot of times be beneficial for people who aren't as marketing savvy, aren't going to do the work that it takes to like hand sell all of these books, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's one of the really good things about traditional publishing, and why I wanted to go with one of the bigger publishers like my publisher, Penguin Random House, rather than one of the medium ones, even though I like the mid-sized presses because I think they do a great job, but they have remarkably smaller advances. And I knew a bigger advance was how I was going to be able to actually continue writing and like working part-time or writing full-time, because you live on that advance for a little while, basically, hoping to sell your next book. So
yeah, because in traditional publishing, you generally don't publish a ton of books a year. So it's like, all right, one book.
Yeah. Also, I mean, if you're like, for example, I sold 2 books, and it's great now to be able to live on my advance for a little while, at least, so I can get that second book out and get that second book to the publisher. So that's another great thing. I probably will eventually, if I don't sell, a 3rd and a 4th book in, a rapid amount of time, have to go back to work. But this gives me a little bit of leeway to write that second book and not have to sweat it so much, So other things to think about.
In traditional YA publishing, at least, the goal seems to be like 1 book a year. Like if you can pump that out, that's good. Business-wise, that's good for your readers and like keeping them engaged. So I was curious, like, what in your ideal world, Kelly, like how many books would you be publishing per year to keep like a self-publishing audience engaged?
For me personally, or like in general self-publishing?
Either.
Both.
Whichever you think is the best.
Like for me personally, my planned route isn't necessarily the smartest one, in that I'd rather be writing in a couple of different genres, where assuming you find the readers for a series, having one long-running series where you can put out a book a month even, that is your safest route to success, assuming that first book takes off. And by takes off, I mean like it grows over time as you put out each new book. The 1 month thing is generally because that helps you stay in Amazon's like hot new releases that kind of after 30 days you drop off that list. So you're putting out a new one, getting eyes on your new release, who will hopefully help your backlist, and then readers reading up from there. So that is the standard.
See, I'm just like, I assume that you'd have to like write all of those books and then publish 1 a month, is what I'm guessing.
It depends on the authors. There's some of them that are just doing insane things and writing so many books so quickly. For me, I'll talk about this a little on my Wednesday video, but I've pulled the first 2 4-of-a-kind books because I'm doing new covers. I'm going to do a quick re-edit, and then I will republish the first one in August, and then 1 a month through November.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because I can't imagine trying to produce and publish one a month. That gives me
I can imagine
stress
it. I will be
thinking about
attempting.
it.
Kelly
Oh my
did a
God.
really interesting post. It was like a week or two ago about her like publishing schedule, and I think it was on your blog, right? And you did like all the different dates for when you were working on things. And it was like, this month I'm gonna finish a draft of this. This is out to the editor, and this is doing this. And it was really interesting. I'm gonna put a link to it in the discussion. I found it really interesting and cool.
I barely remember what I wrote. Okay, yeah, I see it. And I feel like that plan has already changed a bit since I first published that about a month ago, since I decided to republish with new covers. That I had a friend who did the cover design for me, and I wasn't able to put a lot of money into that before the whole getting married thing, because that took a lot of money. But it also resulted in some money that I'm going to try to invest a little more and see how that plays out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fun.
Yeah.
I like this stuff.
I see. That's the thing. If you love doing this stuff, self-publishing is perfect for you. But like, it's funny because I'll message Kelly a lot, being like, help. Like, I just it'll be little nitpicky things like that. I have to try to upload it on CreateSpace, and I'm like, well, no, I don't want to do this. So I'll pay someone to do it. It's like little stuff like that probably I will publish the 3 Frost books or the 4 Frost books or whatever it is, and then just leave them, and potentially publish more in the future, but just like pay someone to do all of it. Because I'm like, I like that I can have whatever say I want in these, but I'm also not going to be trying to make a whole career out of self-publishing either, because I am doing both. But I like that I have that option because it's almost like keeps me entertained on the side.
It's a passion project.
Yeah. Well, and because traditional publishing is so slow that I found being a hybrid author like saved my sanity, essentially. Self-publishing like helped me not go crazy while I was waiting, and it still does. So that's a bonus of it.
We had another question from Mr. Eaton91. If a certain type of story, such as dystopia, is a bit quiet on the market, like he has been told recently about his latest manuscript, do you think it's wise to continue to sub to literary agents?
I mean, it doesn't hurt to sub. If it's dystopian is super hard to sell right now, but if it's like got a commercial enough hook or the voice is compelling enough, you could get people telling you, an R&R or something. And I don't know, I would try. And then if it doesn't work and you want to decide to pursue self-publishing, then you can use that, because people still read dystopian. It's just publishers can't sell it, or literary agents can't sell it anymore.
And just because you
it's like vampire books,
if you query that dystopian book to an agent, it doesn't mean that in 6 months you couldn't query a different book to that agent. If the dystopian doesn't get picked up, if no one wants the dystopian and you have to set it aside for now and write something else, then you'll still be able to query that next book. So you might as well try.
Like, you're setting it aside for now. When the dystopian market calms down, you can always query that again when there's a little more room for it in the market.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to like what you want. Like, do you want that book to be traditionally published? And if yes, then you have to just kind of like, it sucks, but you have to be willing to either make some pretty big structural changes to the book or wait it out, keep trying.
I do think that, I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I do think that with the state that the US is in and all the stuff that's happening in politics, I do think, I have a hunch dystopia will eventually come back, but I think that it's going to need to be a unique twist on it and a very compelling voice and characters. But like, my prediction is that eventually it will be back. So you could save it, or even query it, see if you can get any feedback, and completely revamp it and try again in the next 2 years or whatever. But it's fully up to you. If you're like, I would love to try or self-publishing, go for it, right?
We have a question along these same lines. Shanice asked, can you explain this market you all keep talking about?
You cut out. What did you say?
Oh, sorry. Can you explain the market? Like, what is the market?
Oh, it's vague. Okay, so it means what literary agents are selling to the big traditional, well, not big, but to the traditional publishers right now. So right now, like contemporary fantasy, YA fantasy is selling a lot. Contemporary is selling kind of like second in the race. It's doing really well as well. And then there's other things that the market's also very saturated with YA right now. So it could be like it's harder to sell eventually. And whereas middle grade, for example, it's a little easier for literary agents to. I sometimes think it's a little easier for middle grade to sell because there's less of it that authors are writing. It's mainly YA.
Basically, the market.
I don't know
is
how
just
to
like
explain it.
The market is basically what's in demand right now. From publishers,
Yeah,
from
yeah.
readers, from agents.
Trends.
It's what people are looking for. It's the trends. So some things, they'll be called like dead in the market because people don't want to read it or don't want to buy it.
People aren't
It's not
buying
even that.
it.
It's like
personally,
people
if
won't
I
want
see
to
a
buy it
dystopian-
2 years from now. Like
yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's also affected by what the big chain bookstores are buying as well, what they think readers are wanting. That can affect it as well. There's a lot of different factors, but mainly, the publishers and the big chain bookstores. Some of the bookstores I think Barnes & Noble maybe is like condensing some of their YA section. So I don't know if that will affect it. It's just little things like that, right? I think because they're getting room for more like toy aisles and stuff, which is terrible, but that's a whole nother chat.
Awful.
Yes.
Because I go to the bookstore for toys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even you walk into Chapters and it's like half baby products and
Oh,
toys.
tell
And
me
I get
about
why
it.
I get why they do that, because they have to survive, and it's clever because they are surviving in the people come and they buy gifts and housewarming products, and then they also buy books as well when they're there. So it's smart, but it's also, it sucks because it's
I don't want to
condensing
criticize
things
their
down.
business model, but if there were two sections I was not going to cut down at the bookstore, it would be adult romance and young adult.
Yeah.
Those are the two I would try real hard to keep.
No, that's absolutely true. Because YA is, I think, YA is the thing in the market that, adults as well sometimes, but YA has the huge, big trends a lot of the time. And that's also why I said I think middle grade is actually right now is a little easier to sell because it doesn't have these huge trends. So I think that like you're less, publishers are less scared of something being like a knockoff or something, or like, oh, we already have 3 of these types of YAs. So so middle grade is a little more easygoing.
YA publishers do have a tendency to saturate the market with certain types of books. So they'll just push tons of dystopians until everyone is sick of dystopians. Yeah.
When it comes to the market, it feels like agents, publishers, whatever, spend a lot of time trying to guess what that next trend is going to be. And so far, it's been a long time since there's been
we haven't had a
Twilight,
trend in a while.
Hunger Games. So whatever that next one is, and no one's going to see it coming, that it everyone guesses it's going to be some random thing, and then everyone's going to want more of that.
Yeah, well, like even for the program that I'm in with my bookstore, there's sometimes there's little trends that last for 5 or 6 books. It's like Circus Freaks were really big for, I don't know, like 2 months, and then
that's like a mini trend.
And then like more like paranormal, like ghost things were really big for like another month or 2. And again, now it's just kind of dark fantasy, like general dark fantasy. Even the stuff that's coming out is all general dark fantasy.
Great.
Publishing trends rather than like reader trends. It's what the agents were picking up 2 years ago or whatever, not necessarily what the market is looking for. That it's going to be some book that's written spectacularly well that people just cannot get enough of. And then,
we're still waiting for it.
Yeah, exactly.
For a while, it looked like it was going to be the kind of like, for a while it was, and it still could be, because I know this one particular book, Ash something. I actually read it for my agency and really liked it, but someone else snatched it up, and it sold for a whole lot of money. And it's like that high fantasy secret princess thing that's kind of like Throne of Glass.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
It's Throne of Glass style, and I when Throne of Glass series whole came out, I feel like we did have a wave of high fantasy in YA, and then it like calmed down a little bit. And because I was seeing tons and tons of queries for high fantasy, but I'm wondering if that will kind of re-peak up again once the Ash Princess or whatever it's called, once that comes out, because that was like a really good book. So I'm waiting for that to hit the market and see what it does, because that's going to have loads of marketing dollars behind it, I'm pretty sure. So that may be, that's my prediction for another, maybe even just a mini trend, but we'll see. So I always find this very interesting, and it's almost impossible to predict.
Yeah.
We can't see you now.
I know. I need to get my plug. My phone's dying, of course.
Oh no!
No.
Leave us.
I'm dying.
I think this chat is especially interesting for me because I'm on the younger side of the WordNerds, and I haven't really done anything like this. And even the stuff that I've been into, like I intern at Patrick Press, and then I also work with some advanced review things through my work. So I kind of get the both sides, but I don't really get the middle part. So I get the before everything goes, like the editing and stuff, and then I also get the afterward of the like how to market this book, but I don't get anything in between. So it's very informative.
We've got a couple more questions about the literary, about like involving literary agents. So maybe we could answer those and then move on from literary agents for a little bit.
While you guys talk literary agents, I'm turning off my camera so I can eat my dinner.
Sounds good.
I'm not useful here.
We had a question from Carrie asking, is it harder to get an agent if you've written in multiple genres? Should you not mention this in queries?
No,
I don't think it's something you necessarily should would mention in a query, but it's also not going to hurt you if you write in multiple genres.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless if you're published in other genres, then yes, you can mention that in your query.
The only thing I would say is when you're sending out queries, look for agents who represent multiple genres, like the ones you want to write in. And there are a ton out there who they represent contemporary and fantasy, for example. And so you just want to find someone who would be able to help you sell all of the projects you're interested in.
Yeah. If you want to write contemporary and like paranormal fantasy, and you're querying a contemporary book and the agent hates paranormal, like don't sign with them, because when you really want to write that paranormal book, then
or be prepared to publish under a different name with your paranormals and try and find a different agent for those.
Most agents aren't going to say like, oh, I don't want to represent you in multiple genres. Like agents and publishers want you to write a lot, so
they want money.
They don't care if it's multiple genres.
We had another question. Generally, how long is the publishing process after you get signed to a literary agent? This is so variable. Oh.
Yeah. Because, you can be on, I mean, most times when you actually sell a book, it's relatively similar. Like it'll be about 1 to 2 years. But if you are talking like
from the
before it comes out, from the moment you sell it to the moment it comes out. But if you are talking like, how long does it take to do edits with your agent? How long does it take to be on sub? We touched on this a little bit on the last chat, but it can be anywhere from, mine was 10 days. Mine was sold in 10 days, which is unusual.
Which is very fast.
Very fast.
But also it was your second agent, so.
It was my second agent, and actually like the third time I've been on sub. The first 2 times I went on sub, crickets. There was neither of the books sold. So it's very subjective. It depends on your book. It depends on your agent. Because some agents, like my current agent now, is great because she's literally on editors' doorsteps like before it even goes out. She's like, I have this book. Do you want me to send it to you? because she has those contacts, those immediate contacts. So people are asking for it right away. It goes to the top of their pile. So that's why an awesome agent is really important. But yeah, it can also be like a year till it sells, and you can still get a great deal that way.
So
and
sometimes that book won't sell, and your agent will ask you to write something else so that you can try something else. So
which happens a lot.
Which is why you should be writing something else while you're on.
No matter what your plan, like publishing plan is, always be writing something else.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Very good advice. Just to save your sanity.
Veronica Roth, she got an agent with a book, and then they went on sub with it, and it didn't sell. But when she had gotten her agent, she mentioned that she was working on this other book, or that she had worked on this other book at one point, and it was Divergent. And her agent said, "How about you work on that one again, clean it up, and then we'll try subbing that." And that was the book that got published. So,
it's a little more. It's funny, when I first went into this, I was sure that 2 years was like the average length of time once you got the contract. But since then, I've actually had friends that have had deals that usually it means if you've got a big deal on a book and you've got the editor will usually try to get your book out in the next year. Usually it's like a year from the signing the contract to when it comes out. It happens a lot faster some of the time. So I found that interesting as well. That can mean that the publisher is eager to get you out there, and you're going to have a big push and a big marketing dollars, because that's happened to 2 of my friends now. So their book, one of my friends, she got a big deal and a big marketing push and everything. And her book is actually coming out the same year as mine, even though she got her deal, I think, like a year after mine or something along those lines. So I find that very interesting. Yeah. It's not solid, concrete. They don't talk about it, right? It's not something that is talked about. It just, you see it happening and you're like, oh, okay, that's what that means. It's like, actually Pub Crawl talked about it a little bit too. Like when certain books are released in certain seasons, fall season can mean like, those are the big lead titles. That's when those come out. So if your book is being released in the fall, it probably means you've got big marketing push behind you. And I'm like, okay, these are things that they don't explicitly tell you. You just learn as you go along. Interesting.
But also certain kinds of books get published during certain times of the year.
Oh yeah, very true.
A lot of cute romances in the summer.
Yeah.
Beach reads. Yep.
A lot of creepier stuff in the fall.
Halloween. Yeah. Very true. Yeah.
Because at certain times of the year, we're in the moods for different kinds of things, honestly. Like a lot of times when it's super sunny outside, I'm not in the mood for a dark fantasy, as much as I love them.
Yeah. We had a question from Ion asking, what do you do when your beta readers tell you that your book is hot and a possible bestseller, but it doesn't sell?
I think I need more context.
Yeah.
Can you give us
more
more
context? Doesn't sell as in doesn't.
Are your beta readers your family?
Yes. Does I would want to know, like, doesn't sell self-publishing, or doesn't sell like you already have a book deal and it's not selling, or
or didn't get an agent, or
I don't know.
How familiar are your beta readers with what is selling?
Yeah, I would always be wary of someone telling me your book is going to be a bestseller, because no one can really predict that.
Yeah.
No
one, not even literary agents that are like, I think this is going to be huge. Like, well, you think so, but like we said, it's impossible to predict trends. So
we talked.
You can give it your best shot, but
we talked in our last, like the part 1 of this chat, about the big article that like inspired it was by Susan Dennard, and she wrote about her experience publishing her first series, which was the Something Strange and Deadly series. And the publishers gave her a lot of money for it because it was steampunk, and they thought steampunk was the next big thing. And it ended up flopping because steampunk wasn't the next big thing. And she talked a lot about how like that almost ended her writing under that name. It was like her next series had to sell well, because sometimes you don't predict the trends right, and it kind of screwed over like her business because of it.
It's funny because like the first, I was in the tail end of that steampunk trend as well. The one that it flopped. The trend didn't pan out the way that the agents thought it would. And my first book that didn't sell was steampunk. And like it got the agent because everyone was like, oh, steampunk is huge, and it had so much interest. And then my first agent offered, but we waited for 2 years we didn't. He took that long to edit it. And then by the time we were having it out on submission, that trend had flopped. So that's why that didn't sell. And it's funny because if it had sold earlier, maybe I would have been in the same position as Susan Dennard. So that's interesting to think about. So, yeah.
That is something I like about self-publishing again, of like, if you don't do well, there's no one.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Like you're the only person who has to believe you can do it. Where like your history doesn't matter, you get that next book out. Whereas
absolutely,
even going under another name, there's only so far publishers will look at your sales record and say, oh yeah, let's give this person $100,000.
That reminds me of something that actually Hugh Howey is somebody that I wrote to when I first self-published Frost, because I was like all nervous about it, and I'm like, I don't know if I can sell YA because teenagers often don't have credit cards, and what if they don't buy my stuff online? And he said, just basically chill out, like it's going to be there forever. It doesn't go away. There's no like, it doesn't go out of print like it does in traditional publishing. It's on the internet forever, and you will slowly build your fan base up, and you will slowly build your sales up. And it, like, I don't know, I just was like, that's a really comforting thing to hear, because it's true. It doesn't go out of print. You don't get like a publisher telling you, sorry, we're not giving you a second chance. You have infinite chances when it comes to self-publishing.
The happy ending to Susan Dennard's story is that Truthwitch did well enough that they're re-releasing Something Strange and Deadly.
Yeah, they have all the new covers now. I was wondering about that.
The covers are beautiful.
They're really cool.
Yeah, because she has that dedicated fan base now that will buy them.
And they definitely, like, the cover redesign is way more geared towards a fantasy audience, whereas the original covers are like girl in a steampunk ball gown. These are like girl in definitely Victorian clothes, but with like magic surrounding her and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it interesting because I remember when we thought that steampunk was going to be big, because there was that Girl in the Steel Corset that Harlequin released, and a couple of other ones. And the funny thing is, a lot of those books weren't very good. But I wonder if that's partly why that trend ended up flopping. It didn't really end up being a trend.
I was like, the few steampunk books that did well too tended to be like lighter steampunk, like Cassandra Clare's Clockwork Angel, or like Scott Westerfeld's Leviathan, which like I love, but it's not like a super strong steampunk. So there's a lot of lighter steampunk things that did well.
Sherry Priest was someone who put out a bunch of steampunk books that I quite liked. Those were quite popular, but then that was just like the start of what we thought was a trend, and it didn't turn out to be as mainstream as we thought it would be.
Yeah, I think it's
very
interesting with the
trend.
Yeah, it's interesting with the YA audience, especially that they're so finicky about what they'll read and what they'll pick up and drop. And that's interesting, as in like Stephen King, like he has he writes kind of the same thing over and over again, and everyone loves him, and people continuously buy his books no matter what. And same with a lot of other adult authors. But for the YA, it is all to trend, and sometimes it's like, we want steampunk and only steampunk, and want steampunk forever, and then suddenly it's like, it's not cool anymore, and then you have to suddenly start with like the whole other, like, oh, now we want cute contemporaries, and then like, oh, now we want LGBT, and now we want dark fantasy. And it's interesting to see how it's how it's just like, on a whim they'll just change and be like,
it's very teenage though. It's very teenage. Like that's how like being a teenager was. It was like something would be really cool for a few months, and then it wasn't cool anymore.
No, I don't necessarily mean the publisher. I mean like the actual people that are reading it.
Yeah.
That's just it.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I do think that in part it is the publishers.
Oh,
like
yeah,
it
definitely.
is in part the publishers being like, let's try this. Like they're very like continually try like a bunch of different things, right? So
well, also it's kind of like if you have a bunch of people suddenly writing contemporaries, it's like, well, let's make everyone want them, and then you can publish a whole bunch more. It's like, oh, we'll just figure it out later.
It is actually, that's also like very much true. I don't know how that happens, but I noticed, and Megan might have noticed this too, I don't know if you read a lot of queries or mostly just manuscripts, but in my inbox, I would be like, okay, we're all pirates for the last 3 months, or oh, it's all secret princesses, or like all epic fantasy. Like people,
it's so weird how people start writing.
It is, but like writers like have this mind meld, and they are all sending me werewolf manuscripts in like the same month for some reason. I don't know why, but that's what happens.
Yeah.
Well, I think like writers, at least, should also be readers of YA. So I think a lot of us also, like, it's the things we want to see in YA, and we all want to see it at the same, because there's
we all notice there's a hole in this one spot.
Yeah, well, it's like enough, and maybe enough people have read enough dystopian that doesn't have a strong main character, so they're like, I'm going to write one with a strong main character, and then that all takes them about a year, and then they're all subbing at the same time. So it's that kind of idea.
And I know the market can seem like this crazy, like, oh, publishing houses are just throwing darts at a board and seeing what sticks. But it is like, it's a business. They have a lot of data that we as writers don't see. They talk to all the different book retailers, and they get so much data. And so it is like founded in consumer studies and stuff. It's just sometimes it doesn't stick when you think it would, despite what the data was saying. And so sometimes to us, when we're trying to sell books, it can seem like, what are they even doing?
I think we're kind of it like in comparing it to fashion, where all the stores are suddenly trying to sell pastel things, and you're like, well, I don't really like wearing pastel things, but it doesn't matter because that's all that's there. So you're like, well, okay, fine, I'll buy a pastel thing. And or like when they're like, oh, well, the 90s is back, and so everyone's like, oh, okay, I better get on that. And then suddenly they're like, the 90s isn't there, the 70s is in now, and I'm like, no, just no, should have stayed there. Just like that kind of thing where you're just attempting to try and like change everyone's mind, even though some people are like, I'm not gonna go with it.
Yeah, there's definitely something behind it. Like I personally, like it would take a lot for me to pick up a dystopian right now, because like I got really sick of them towards the end of the trend. Like so like I think there is something behind when trends like go to, because obviously like if dystopian books were still making a lot of money, then like publishers would still pick them up. Like, like they're not going to be like, no, we just don't want them anymore. Like if they thought they could still make a lot of money off them, I think they would still pick them up. And they still pick some up. That's the thing also, that like while there's these big trends, there's always like other books coming out. Like with fashion, like there may be a ton of pastels, but you're always going to find some basics in the store too, So like even if it's all like dark fantasy, you'll probably find some like happy fantasies too being published. They're not only publishing one thing at a time.
Yeah. And this is the thing that's different between traditional and self-publishing as well. Because with traditional publishing, a lot of it is trajectories. So it's like, based on this trajectory, we don't think that dystopian is going, like, we think we've hit the peak and it's going to stop selling as well. But when you're self-publishing, you can get it out really quick, and it doesn't matter if in 2 years dystopian isn't going to be selling, because your book will have been out for 2 years by then.
And in a lot of those genres, there are always some books selling. Like there's a lot of like self-published dystopians that are doing really well right now, and vampire stories, and all of those things that publishers will not touch, but there's still a solid reader base for. That would only ever get you like mid-list status in the traditional publishing world, but mid-list in self-publishing can pay all of your bills.
Yeah, because there will always be someone that dystopian is their thing, that they just want to read all the time, and that's where self-publishing fills that gap for them.
One of the things I'm really interested in talking about, if we don't have like a next thing, is marketing expectations. So not the market, but marketing.
Ooh, yeah. Let's do it.
Do you have a jumping off point, or?
That's my jumping off point.
Okay.
No. Yeah, so when you're self-publishing, obviously, it's like you market everything yourself. What are the big things that you focus on? Like, what do you put your time and effort into for marketing when you're indie pubbing?
That you see more trends there than you do in like what you should be writing. Like right now, the big one is BookBub, which is you get a newsletter in your inbox every day with heavily discounted books, and they very much curate which deals they're willing to share with their audiences. But if you can get a BookBub, you are golden because they will sell thousands and thousands of copies. And then there's a lot of smaller ones of like that same newsletter thing that you're signing up for. I like deals in dystopian, so send me those books, and they'll send you some every day. So getting into a bunch of those is a big thing in the indie publishing world right now of like, okay, if you're going to do a promo on book one, you put them in a bunch of those newsletters, sell a bunch at a discount, and then hopefully that will trickle through. People will like the first book and buy the second and third and fourth or whatever at full price. Doing advertising through Amazon is also fairly big in like what people are talking about right now, and trying to figure out how to best use that system, because Amazon will let you set like keywords and stuff. So your little ad with your cover will go out to anyone who uses this keyword, and you're paying per click and all of that. So it's not that fancy of like, oh, blog tours and stuff like that anymore. Like there's not a lot of that getting actual sales. So it's more like watching which newsletters are working and which ads are working and all of that stuff.
That's cool. So how do you tell like which things are translating into sales?
That is where being involved in the community is really helpful. Like I'm in a bunch of Facebook groups and a forum that a lot of self-publishers are on. So just listening to other people, like some will do full threads on forums of their launch strategy, and then every day will let you know how many books they sold, of like which promos they were doing that day, and then you can kind of get a sense of this book's similar to mine, these ones worked. And then you're also hoping you are well versed enough that your cover is what it needs to be in order to attract those newsletter readers or to get click-throughs on your ads and all of that. So you want to have a product first that's going to work well in those things, and then figure out which ones make sense for you.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find like those groups to get involved in? Like, are there particularly big Facebook groups or Twitter threads?
Kboards is a forum that was very big when I first got into self-publishing. It's less popular now, but from there I found like one self-publisher who went on to do like books on how you can self-publish, has her For Love or Money self-publishing group where they talk about self-publishing stuff. And then there's the 20 books to 50K group, which is probably the biggest one right now, of one author at the beginning of like 2015 or something figured out that he was making this much on each of his 2 books. So if he could just write 20 books, he'd be making 50,000 words a year, which is all he needed to make in order to retire to Mexico. And that guy, I think he's coming up on making $1.5 million since then. But
Wow.
So everyone's in his group. Like, it's just community. You have to follow the communities to kind of where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's awesome. And Erin, obviously, last time you weren't allowed to announce that you had a book deal, but you did.
Yeah. Yes.
So have you started working with like a publicity team or like a marketing team? Or?
Well, I just got the introduction. My book is out February of next year. So I just got the introduction specifically to my, I don't know what you would call her, to my marketing specialist that works in publicist. Yes, thank you. Good Lord. That's the word I was looking for. Words are hard. Publicist in Canada. She's specifically in my area. So she works in Vancouver and Victoria. So I got to talk to her, and she has been, she's told me a little bit, middle grade is a lot more low key than YA is. So I'm finding it very interesting, because I was very much expecting to debut like as a YA, and middle grade just kind of like almost accidentally happened for me, because it is a genre I really love and I really enjoy writing, but I hadn't been counting on debuting with that. So I'm finding this very interesting, because I'm seeing the contrast between, I'm in like the 2018 debut group, which is a mixture of middle grade and YA. And I'm seeing the contrast between our middle grade marketing and the YA marketing. It is very different, because YA is all online. It's cover reveals, it's vlogging, it's blog tours, not so much blog tours anymore, because people don't that's not as popular anymore. But it's very online focused, and middle grade is almost zero online focused, because you cut out a bit. But yeah, like they said that I might have a blog tour. This might be something that happens. I was kind of shocked, actually. But they said the majority of what's going to happen will be like sending out review copies to library journals, and books will be advertised to like middle schools, and it will be in so I'll be probably, she did ask me, hey, what's your schedule like for like the fall, for example? Would you be able to show up at like literary festivals and stuff? So actual author appearances are really invaluable. Like I know that a lot of my middle grade writer friends go to schools and libraries and show up places like that, and signings at bookstores, because an author appearance was going to sell a lot more books than doing anything online. So yeah, so it's very different. But another thing that I find very interesting is you'll kind of have a vague idea of how much marketing dollars they're going to throw at you, in accordance to how much you got for your advance. So that is very related. So you can kind of suss out if you're, one of their lead titles, or you're like a middle title, or if your book is going to be more quiet in relation to that. And also, like I said, how fast they push your book out. Mine was a full 2 years, so it's kind of going to be like I assume like a mid-list title, but it's a quiet imprint as well. So it could be one of their more active titles for the imprint. I don't know, fingers crossed. But I'm loving I love the lady that has been chatting back and forth, my publicist that I just met. She's lovely. Hopefully get to meet her at like one of the festivals here or something. So yeah, I mean, I'm just starting out, and I definitely will be talking about it more in the WordNerd videos. So
yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting with like the big publishing houses. It's like some of them are known for doing a ton of marketing for you, while others it's like, oh, well, if you sign with them, they're going to get you into the catalogs and stuff, but you're going to have to do all of your marketing on your own with your advance check.
Yeah, exactly. I think Tor is one of the ones that I don't want to say it wrong, but I'm pretty sure Tor is one of the ones that doesn't do as much. But I think they also publish great books that do well. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything bad either, right? And then you got smaller sort of mid-sized presses like Source Books that do an incredible job at marketing their authors. Like a few of the and Quirk Books, they're smaller. So I wouldn't ever underestimate any of these medium presses, because they do a great job. Like I see all their authors at literary festivals and BA, and they're sending their authors to places like this. So it's pretty cool.
Isn't Tor also known for slightly bigger advances?
Yes.
So it's like you get less marketing,
I think
but
so.
you make more money up front.
And I feel like Tor books kind of sell themselves to a certain type of reader.
Yeah,
they do very much so. Yeah,
well, I mean, if I see something from Tor, I'm like, okay. Like,
Sure. And that's kind of the big
Tor,
publishing houses tend to do that. Like, a lot of times you're like, oh, this is a book from this big publishing house. This is a book from HarperCollins. It'll probably be a good one, like so.
Yeah, there was a while there were like Harper Teen books where like that's what I was following.
Oh yeah.
They were going to be the ones putting out the stuff I was interested in.
Yeah.
And then they had a movie I moved on.
I also find it interesting to look at who is getting book tours. Like Sarah J. Maas, for example, what she's talking about, I listened to her podcast when Throne of Glass first sold. Her publisher sent her out on a book tour like immediately. Like that was they pushed it a lot, and then they sent her out. And I know one of my friends got a relatively good deal for her books. I think it's a 3-book deal, and she's going on like a UK US book tour as well. Like that was literally in the contract when she signed it, right? So like that still does happen, but it's incredibly rare. I think authors times don't realize how rare that is now, which kind of sucks, because I was always hoping that would happen someday.
I think it's especially rare for debut authors because like readers don't know you, but if you can establish yourself and you have a lot of readers who really like you, then you're more likely to go on a tour. Once they know that people might actually show up for you,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's especially true for like my friend who got the UK US book tour is also, she's like, has a big following on a couple different platforms. Like she's a very personable person. She knows people, almost everywhere it seems like. And yeah, so she knows how to make these connections, right? And a publisher will look at all of your social media before they offer on your book. And if they see that you have that big platform and you're working those connections and you've got fans already in place, then you could end up getting an offer like that, because they're like, well, we know if she shows up, she's actually going to have people come and line up for her to sign their books.
Yeah, there's a YouTube channel I follow, Just Between Us, that they used to be on BuzzFeed, blah, 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 but they got a book deal for a YA or kind of new adult beginning of college, and they're going on a tour for their debut because they have a following elsewhere. So there's so many levels to it. Like there's no hard and fast rule of like, make this happen, then this is going to happen. Every scenario.
Unfortunately.
Erin Bowman did a post. She's the author of the Taken trilogy and the Vengeance Road duology, I believe it is. And like she did a post on Publishing Crawl. I'm putting a link to it in the discussion right now. She did one about marketing as a traditionally published author and like the major things that she was doing on her own because it wasn't getting like a ton of marketing dollars behind it, and there was a lot of stuff she was still going to be responsible for. And she talked about for her how like postcards and bookmarks were actually the biggest thing. Like she sent postcards to all the libraries and bookstores within a driving radius that she would be willing to visit herself, and was like, hey, I'm Erin Bowman, this is my book, it's got the cover on the postcard and stuff. And it was like, I would love to come and talk to you about my book, please let me.
That's a great idea.
Said that's how she sold a lot of copies and set up a lot of like signings in her area and started getting some name recognition that way.
And she talks in that post too about like strategies that didn't do anything,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because like you can, as an author, even a traditionally published author, you can spend a lot of your money on
things. You can spend all of it.
Some of it will not work at all. So like, I think she talks about how she thinks it's good to focus on just one or two things that work really well instead of trying to spread yourself out and do everything.
Yeah.
I love the idea of sending out postcards to libraries and bookstores with like a personal handwritten note on it saying like, I'd love to show up and do like a reading or a book signing or whatever. Cause like, that's just it's like a personal touch, and it's also really easy for the author to do. And it doesn't cost much postage to mail a postcard or just drop one off, right? Like I like that idea, that type of thing. It's very effective.
And even if they don't invite you to come do anything at the bookstore, it at least gets them like the title of your cover, your cover in their brain, and then they might read it, and then they might recommend it to more readers. So.
Yeah, or if a librarian sees it, they'll recognize the cover when they get their catalog, and they'll be more likely to order it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Because like those catalogs, my library, we order fully through review sources, so like School Library Journal, Publishers Weekly. We don't do catalogs, but like that, like when you're reading through one of those, like everything starts to blur together after a while. There's so many books in there, and you're just depending on the synopsis that like the reviewer gives, which sometimes like those will be off. Like there will be times where I'll do the School Library Journal and I'll be like, oh, this book sounds awful, and then like my boss does the Publishers Weekly and she's like, this book sounds great. So, like, making it so that when the librarian reads that title in the magazine and they're like, oh, I've heard of this book and I've heard good things, or the author was really nice, it'll at least make it stand out when you're in it.
It will make it stand out.
Local. Like people love supporting local authors from their cities, so like take advantage of that.
Exactly.
And simultaneously support the other local authors in your city. We had a question from Jody asking, why do publishers change release dates? For example, there were 2 books that were supposed to come out in August that got pushed back to January.
It usually something to do with the author a lot of the time. It's if you've, missed deadlines, a lot of the time, life happens and, authors, miss their deadlines and they have to push back.
They have to re-edit something or.
Yeah, like they made their deadline, but they realize there's a bigger problem they need to fix.
Yeah. And sometimes it just has to do with publishing schedules that they decide to do something around.
Well, actually, a lot of what happens too is if somebody else gets their book pushed back, that does mess up the whole production schedule, because that's a very, set, I don't want to say set in stone, but like it's a ladder basically that all the books have a certain date. So if you mess up that schedule, other books might have to get moved around too. I don't think they try not to do that, but that sometimes happens.
Yeah. But a lot of times if a book gets pushed back, the book is going to be a better book because of it. So I hate when I see readers getting mad at an author because their book got pushed back, because it's either not the author's fault or they're making it a better book. Like,
Yeah.
You don't want a book to come out and be like rushed and the author's stressed the whole time.
Well, and then the readers would complain about that.
Yeah, exactly.
The book's not good enough. Yeah.
We've all read that book where the author was stressed to push out the next book and it wasn't good. So.
And we have.
Yeah, and you should have taken more time with it.
We have a really good question here. What do publishers consider a big following on social media?
Also subjective. I don't know. You can have even if you have 10,000 Twitter followers, but they're like super engaged with you and they retweet everything you tweet and they follow all the links you post. That's huge, right?
I think it's more about loyalty than anything.
Yeah. So
because if you have like 2 million followers and like 10 of them talk to you, then it's like, oh, it doesn't really matter. But if you have 10,000 and they all talk to you all the time, you're like, well, yeah, sure.
But also it's definitely not
so it's about loyalty. But you what's that?
Yeah.
It's not necessary to get published, is what she said.
Yeah, to get published. Most debut authors are unknown. People don't know them. They don't have 10,000 followers.
I mean, it helps, but
you don't even need to have a like any following to get published. You don't I know authors that aren't on social media. Like they have a Facebook and that's it. Yeah. Well, and they're still getting published.
It's more about the quality of your work, not how many followers you have, although it does help to have them.
Yeah.
It does make you a more attractive package to try for them to promote. But yeah, it's not something you need to be completely stressed about, because publishers aren't going to look at your 500 followers and be like, well, that's not good enough. That's not going to happen if your book is good.
Why are you not famous before you're even published?
Exactly.
Yeah. What the heck?
Yeah, it's a question I ask myself all the time.
Why am I not
Where's my famous fortune?
Why are you not more popular? Come on.
Yeah, I think one of the things that a big following typically shows to publishers isn't necessarily like you have 10,000 followers, you are obviously going to sell 10,000 books in your first week, because they know that's not true. I think it shows more like this person has done the work to cultivate a following, and so they're going to be more open to pushing their book, like they're going to market, and they're not going to be afraid to do that, which is what in turn will make your book more successful.
Yeah, it also shows you know how to handle yourself on social media. You're not driving people away, you're drawing them in. You have a web presence already they can utilize. So yeah, I mean, you don't need to have a big following, but it doesn't hurt either, that's for sure.
Oh, covers. We still haven't talked that much about covers and deciding good covers, or how much control you have over covers when you're traditionally publishing.
0. Usually.
Well, that 2% maybe.
Yeah.
It depends how big of an author you are, really.
Yeah.
but even the big ones, for the most part,
Even
like
then,
I
I
think
would
Lee
think
Bardugo.
for the big authors, they probably have even less control. Like, we know your book's going to sell. We're going to give it a cover that sells.
They
not
don't
a
have a lot. No, some of them have some say, but like I know I was listening to the podcast and Lee Bardugo was talking about her Six of Crows one, and I think they sent her, or I don't know if it was Lee Bardugo. It was a big author. It was either Sarah J. Maas or Lee Bardugo said that she didn't like the mock-up they sent, and she was like, can we try something else? And they were like, no, we like this, basically. And then it was just a mock-up, and she liked the real version after they finished it. But like, yeah, I was kind of a little bit startled listening to that, because I was like, yeah, you're really big, and they're still like, sorry, we're gonna go with it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's actually kind of interesting because I'm like, I model sometimes, so like I have, some like fashiony stuff there. But I was talking with my agent about this once, how I got the photos back from a shoot that I did, and I was like, oh, I love this one. And she was like, like, we're not going to put that one in your portfolio. I was kind of like, well, why not? Like, it's a really nice photo. Like, why don't you like it? And she was saying that everybody picks a different photo based on what they like. So the agent will pick a photo that is very different than anything else you have in your portfolio, so it makes you look really diverse. The model wants to pick a photo that makes her look pretty, and the hair person wants to pick a photo that the hair looks best. And same with the makeup artist, and the magazine wants a picture that like goes well with the overall story that they're trying to put together. So everyone will choose a different photo. Sometimes they mix and match, but a lot of the time they're always really different. It's really interesting to see what ones people pick, because there's been many times that I'm like, why did you pick that to like put that there? Like, why is that one the one that you like? Like, I look awful in it. And they're like, oh, well, you can see the makeup really good here. I'm like, okay. So I guess it kind of has to do with the same with book ones, where they're like, the publisher is like, we think this will sell because of A, B, or C, and the author's like, but that has like that character doesn't look anything like my character, or that's not a really good symbol, or like I put a lot of symbolism into this in there. Why don't you mention that? And they're like, well, that's not going to look good on a cover. And so,
like, that's some place that a lot of self-publishers get into trouble of, like, you have full control over what your cover looks like. You're working with an artist, hopefully, if you're not doing it yourself, you're working with an artist to try to make your vision come to life. But if you don't know what works visually or what trends make sense for your genre, so you're going to attract the right reader, you can tank your book before it publishes with the wrong cover. So having those people, like, you lose control.
You may say, like, I love this kind of cover, and your publisher, knows that the past 10 books they've published with that sort of cover tanked, which is not something you know. But also, like, if there is something you really, really, really feel strongly about, like, make sure you say it. Because, like, I know, like, Jodi Meadows, with her newest book, when they told her, like, oh, we're going to put a girl on the cover, she said, well, like, she better be a black girl because the main character is black. Like, please do not whitewash my character. And they listened to her with that, because they also knew that was not a good idea.
They might not have 10 years ago.
Yeah. May not have. Yeah.
This is where having an agent comes in very, very handy. When I interned at a literary agency,
sorry.
The agent was helping out one of her clients who had just received her cover through email, and she hated it, like really, really hated it. Thought it didn't match the book at all. It was like a book about a country person, but the person on the cover looked like a rocker, and she just felt like it wasn't her book at all. And so she expressed this to her agent, who has all the language and the relationship already to go in and be like, hey, so can we tweak this and this and this? And then the agent can help navigate it if it's something you feel super, super, like, really passionately about. And it varies from house to house. Like, it's not always going to be that way. Sometimes they're going to say, no, we're putting our foot down. Like, this is what sells, and so we have to do it. But there are instances where a publishing house will work with you.
Well, like, Aaron, that kind of happened with you, didn't it? With your...
What's that?
I remember you were talking to me about your own cover at first and all the color decisions that had been made, and you were a little bit, like, iffy about it.
Yeah, it's funny because that's a good point.
Like, can we talk about that? Are you allowed to talk about that?
No, I'm allowed to talk about it. Yeah, someone was talking about how it's really about how the publisher sees it doing in the marketplace, like where on the shelf it would be, what kind of like flavor they want almost to, I don't know how to explain it, like what kind of tone they want to portray. And my cover was very like almost upmarket, which is like a mixture of literary and commercial. And I was not picturing it that way originally. I was picturing it kind of like a dark gothic-y cover, and it's still very creepy, but it's got a more literary looking cover. And that's the way they're selling it. And that's the way that Tundra is very much like that. It matches their other covers. And I wasn't sure about it at first, but I know that a lot of other authors have said the same thing in my debut group. Like, it's never going to be what you expect, so you're not going to be sure if you like it at first. But I really like mine now, so like a lot.
I know something cool that they always say, and I know we've like mentioned this a couple times, but the Pub Crawl podcast, which if you have lots of questions about traditional publishing, it's definitely a podcast you should listen to. But something that they say a lot when they talk about things like this is that, like, publishers don't want unhappy authors. Like, they don't want you to hate them. They don't want you to be miserable, because they don't want you going to other authors and saying, don't ever publish with this publisher, they're terrible, you know? And happy authors write more books, and happy authors say good things about their publisher, and happy authors promote their book and don't go on Twitter and say, I hate my cover, you know? So like, they don't want you to be miserable. So definitely, like, if you have an issue, or if there's something you feel strongly about, express it through your agent if you need to, if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, like Megan said. But they don't want you to be like upset.
Yeah. And these cover designers, it's like, that's their career. They're going to show their families these covers. Like, this is like their goal. Like, this is,
that's their job. That's how they make money to eat. So.
I'm posting a link in the discussion right now to a really interesting post by Fierce Reads for the book The Love Interest by Cale Dietrich. And the cover designer did a whole big post about all the different mock-ups they did and all of the things that went into making this cover what it was. And it's an amazing cover. I love it so much.
It's a really cool cover.
Post so fascinating.
Ooh, okay. I'm definitely going to read that.
I also find it like it was helpful to think about the fact that the publisher does usually, like, most of the time they know what they're doing, and they're doing it for a very specific reason. Like this cover is designed to sell the book. And to give the reader an idea of what they're getting into before they open the book. Also, it's interesting that Barnes and Noble, like the big bookstores, can veto a cover or get them to change it to the way they want it to.
That's super interesting.
If there's too many black covers on the shelf, then they can say, we don't want this cover to be black too, because all the other
they can make you change it.
Last names have black covers, and there'll be too many of them together. But like, also,
or we don't think this will sell.
What I was gonna say, which Erin kind of like said a little bit, is that like, publishers also don't want your book to fail, because they've invested a bunch of money into it. Like, they're not making decisions to be like, ha, this book won't sell if we give it this awful cover. Like, Sophia Cigar in their office chuckling over how they're going to ruin your career. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's one of the things I find so amazing about going the traditional route, is that you end up with this big team of people, and all of them like love your book and believe in it. And I think that's a really cool thing. It's just like this little team, and you're all working so hard together to try and put out the best thing that you can.
Yeah. Because for a book to be acquired by a publisher, it's not just the editor that has to love it and believe in it. It's the whole team.
That's actually something, like, jumping back a little bit to being on sub, like, one of the things that is very interesting, like, I asked my agent, can you tell me, like, you know, periodical updates, because I want to know a little bit about what's going on. And yeah, they do have to. The editor will take it to the acquisitions meeting, and sometimes it can have to go through 2 or 3 meetings even. And so, like, my book eventually, like, made it to an acquisitions meeting in the UK, but then they didn't get signed off by, you know, the next step. So that fell through or whatever, you know, just stuff like that. That's very interesting, that your book has to go through like more than one hoop. And which is why it's like, it is hard. It is hard to get a deal. But I don't know, that's why it's just so important to be persistent and be writing the next book. Because yeah, it's hard. So if you get there, pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, we had some people talking in the comments about cover changes partway through series.
Yeah.
The Diviner series.
It's like the third freaking time. Third or fourth. Oh god. I just saw a new.
I wonder why they do that 3 or 4 times.
Soft cover again at work the other day for pre-order. It's like, oh, why? Well, I know, like, I get it. They change cover because they're like, it's not selling. Let's put a new cover on it and try and trick people into thinking it's a different book. So maybe then they'll buy it. But I'm like, why would you go through like 6 cover changes? Why would you do it in the middle of a series? Oh, it just bothers me so much.
Try to trick people.
Yeah. Well, that's basically it, right?
They'll never know.
It doesn't sell with this cover. Maybe it'll sell with this cover.
Yeah.
As
Hence
readers,
it's like something strange and deadly. It's like, first of all, it's steampunk, and now it's gonna be fantasy. But it's the same book.
Yeah, I think like as readers and book collectors, it sucks when the cover changes, particularly when it changes partway through the series. But from like a business standpoint, if the book isn't selling enough and you think it would be worth it, like if you think the cover is significantly damaging its chances, then like it does make sense to change it.
I get it.
Yeah, because changing the cover usually is not going to stop someone who loved the first book from buying the second book. As much as annoying as it is, you're still going to buy it because you loved the first one and want to read the next one.
Yeah,
it could help someone new to pick up the first book. So it makes sense why they do it, but it's so frustrating.
Yeah. That's why I like when they change like the paperbacks or something.
Yeah.
With the Throne of Glass, it took a super long time to be able to get the first book in hardcover with the new covers. And so I just didn't buy the first book for a really long time because it's like, I'm not going to buy a first book that doesn't look anything like the next 5.
Exactly. Across the universe.
We had a question. Can publishers change your title or name a series title?
Yes.
Bookstores probably will.
Can make
they
you change
often
your title.
Yeah.
How about you, Megan? You have experience with that.
Yeah. When I entered Pitch Wars, my book was called Court of Glittering Crimson. And I wasn't like super attached to the title because I knew that it would probably get changed. And one of the first things my agent said to me when we started edits was, how would you feel about changing the title? And there's like a reasoning behind it. The reasoning for her was that the Court of Thorns and Roses series is still going on. There's still 3 more books coming out or whatever that will have similar titles, and we didn't want my book to get like covered up by that.
There was another YA book in your Pitch Wars group that had a really similar title too, I feel like.
Yeah.
I remember noticing that. I was like, this is really similar to Megan's
There's
title.
also that Rochelle Mead series that we got the
Glittering Court?
Yeah, the Glittering
Court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely important to not be like, if you're going traditionally published, like don't be married to your title. And there are plenty of books that keep their titles. Especially with like authors who are really good at titling their books and have like really creative, cool, like Adam Silvera's books always keep their titles because he has really cool titles, you know.
Yeah.
They both die at the end.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I want it so bad.
Especially when you have like more generic titles, it'll change. Like,
like they were right. It's a much cooler title now. Well, my agent was right. I don't have a book deal. Not trying to give you any hints. I'm still waiting.
Well, what's your title now?
It's called Jagged Crown now.
Yes.
I like that
my
one.
agent suggested it to me, and I was like, oh, wow, that's such an awesome, like, that is so perfect. And she's like, yeah, I pulled it from the text of your book.
That's cool. That's awesome. Yeah, kind of what Emma said, like, don't get attached to anything. Because, like, characters could go, your title could go, you're going to get a lot of edits probably not only from your agent, also from your editor once you do get a book deal, and they will ask you to take out lots and put in lots, and
That's a good question, which is because some author did a post recently about this, about how, like, you don't have to change things. You know, like, in the text of your book, if your publisher says, we'd like you to change this, you don't have to. And I thought that was really interesting. So to what extent can you say no if your editor says, like, I think you should change this plot line?
I actually had that with one particular problem that my editor has suggested fixing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying no, but I think you have to have us come up with another solution. If she says this is a problem with this character and you say I don't want to do what you suggested, then you have to come back with some other way of fixing it, because it's a problem no matter if you don't want to do what she suggested. You still need to figure out how to make it better.
I think you also have to have a reason for why you aren't willing to make the change. You know,
definitely.
Yeah, you can't just be because I like it the way it is. Like,
that goes for bigger changes particularly, but like you can write "stet" beside the smaller changes if you don't want to change it, because a lot of it will be like, that's more like copy editing, but so you can be pickier with that for sure. More stubborn.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes as like an unpublished author, there's always this fear of like, oh, I've heard people say this before, if I go traditionally published, like I won't have control over my book, which is like you still have control over your book. You know, like sure, cover and title are things you don't have. The promotional aspects of your book you don't have as much control over, but your book is your book, and you can definitely say no if you feel strongly about not changing something. They can't force you to write something different.
I have a question for. Oh, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
Oh no, I was just going to say, you definitely I have talked to other authors about this, other debut writers specifically. We're all like, well, I don't want to be too much of a trouble. You have to walk the line between. You have to walk the line between like cooperating and being easygoing with your editor, so they're not like, oh my God, this author is a nightmare to work with. They won't take any of what I'm suggesting. And then also walk the line between standing up for yourself and your story, essentially.
I think standing up for yourself
like I
is a
said,
good word.
Yeah. Well, because like I said before, like if you come to the table with another solution that you like better, that's still cooperating. It's still doing what you have to do. And then you still remain true to your story and yourself.
Yeah, I think definitely if your publisher comes to you and says, these are the changes we want, and you say, I'm not making a single change to the book, like that's a problem.
And there have been authors that have done that.
They can't make you write a change. You can't make them publish your book. So
exactly.
And you can't make them acquire another book from you if they decide you're too difficult to work with. And once again, like a lot of things we talked about, like they are professionals in the industry. So a lot of times they do have good reasons for that, why they want certain things changed. Because they know like a certain thing about your book may not sell well, or maybe something's problematic in your book, or any number of things. Or it could just be a stronger book and an extra set of eyes outside of you can see that.
So when you're indie publishing, you hire your own editor and they make your suggestions, right? So how do you determine, like, if they make a suggestion that you have like this visceral, like, I don't want to do that reaction to, how do you decide in the end, like, is it a suggestion that's best for the book and I need to take it? Or is this like an off suggestion, since you have like so much more control over your book?
That it's going to be where you get kind of similar advice to traditional publishing of like getting second opinions from beta readers and critique partners. And I think every author is going to be different on this one, of like how much is your book your baby versus how well versed are you in which tropes are working in your genre and whatnot. Like there's no hard and fast rule to it. I do find a lot of the editors that indies tend to hire aren't really like most indies don't go for the full developmental edit. You're doing that with critique partners and beta readers and whatever your process is. So you're not getting a lot of those recommendations, which is probably why not every indie book is a success. That sometimes it needs those changes and you need to have someone that can point them out to you.
Okay. We did have a question from Amy. Do you think it's still worth it going with a small publisher?
I think it really depends how small we're talking.
And it depends on what you want.
Yeah. The thing is, I would not go with a small publisher that was just publishing my books online, or a small publisher, because most of the mid-sized publishers that like Source Books and Quirk Books and stuff, they can still get your books into stores.
Yeah,
maybe
I wouldn't
not
consider those small presses.
Those are mid-size. Yeah. Honestly, I personally would not go with a small press that couldn't get me into bookstores, because I can do that on my own. I can self-publish, and they're not taking a cut. A lot of the time, small publishers have the absolute best intentions, but they fall through, or they don't have the organization, or they take on too many projects. Yeah, I would tend to go with a more established press, like I said, Sourcebooks, or somewhere along those lines. So that's my personal opinion, though.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we say comes down to like do your research and know what you want. With small presses, you want to make sure that they've been around for a while, and you want to make sure you really understand what they want from you, like what they are going to be getting from you, and also what you are going to get from them in return, because it shouldn't be like I give them everything and then they make my books a little bit more marketable than it maybe would have been on my own.
Yeah.
You want to make sure it's a really good relationship.
I think you have to decide what they can give you that you can't do yourself for self-publishing. Like, can they get you into any of the big review places? Like, what can they do for you, right? Because otherwise, why are they taking a cut of your money?
We had a question about word counts. This question asked, what's the typical word count for a YA contemporary? I'm starting a pretty heavy contemporary, and I'm thinking about going for 70 to 75K. Is that too much or not enough? I'm also considering self-publishing more than traditional, if that helps. And I think word counts in general are really interesting.
I think that's 70 to 80, like the kind of standard.
In traditional, it's a little long for a contemporary you're trying to get an agent with.
Okay.
I don't think it's really that long for a contemporary that ends up on shelves.
Yeah. I've read long contemporaries before.
Yeah.
And if you're going self-publishing, whatever you
Doesn't
need to
matter.
do is fine.
It's more book.
Whatever you want.
I'm trying to find it. I think the girl who does the Better Novel Project guest vlogged for us. I think if you sign up to her newsletter, she sends you a list of like word count of like big bestsellers to kind of like, here's a guide to what all of these bestsellers. Yeah. So betternovelproject.com/blog. You can get 65 best-selling word counts. Just kind of get an idea. It's a good jumping off point.
Cool.
Of like, this is what the word count was on these mega bestseller books.
Okay, I put that link in the description. I don't think I spelled it wrong. Okay.
So we've been going for quite some time. Was there anything anyone else wanted to touch on before we wrap this up? Or I feel like we could do a million chats on this. And just...
It's daunting, but do your research and you're gonna be fine. Do your research and be persistent.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of information out there, but there's also a lot of people in the community who are talking about these things, and read a lot, engage with other authors, so pick it up as you go.
Yeah, and there's no wrong path. There's no wrong path, traditional or self-published. It's whatever works best for you.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun. We will be back next week with a write-in, so you can join us as we try to do some sprints and get some words done. And yeah, thanks again, and we will see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.